Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelenskiyy and European leaders are also expected at the White House in the next hour to discuss a pathway to peace, to a peace deal that could secure an end to the over 3-year conflict after Russia's invasion in February of 2022. Now, today's high-stakes meeting that will include leaders of France, Germany, Italy, the UK, Finland, the European Union, Commission and NATO comes after bilateral talks on Friday between President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin failed to agree on a ceasefire amid a push from the White House for Ukraine to make territorial concessions in order to secure an agreement with Russia. And President Cyril Ramaphosa also received an update from President Putin early on Monday on the outcome of his talks with President Trump in Alaska, and also underscored the need for more compromise on key issues for a lasting peace deal to be attained. And for more on this, let's get in touch with our U.S. correspondent, Bryce Peace, who is monitoring developments from New York. Sherwin, a very good afternoon to you. So we're just moments away now from the arrivals. We've already seen UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrive earlier on. But what are the key elements to look out for in the aftermath of Friday's bilateral in Alaska? And of course, recent history where things didn't go well for Zelenskyy during his last visit to the White House.
Still a fresh memory, right? February not that long away, and the visuals, the public display of that heated discussion between President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and President Trump, flanked by his Vice President J.D. Vance. Difficult to forget as we now embark on a new moment for Zelenskyy at the White House. But again, a different scenario here, Alicia. He'll be flanked by a number of European leaders, some U.S. media referring to it as a bodyguard of European leaders. And one of the first questions I imagine you and I can ask ourselves is, will Volodymyr Zelenskyy be wearing a suit, right? Probably not. But you know what a sticking point even that became in that fraught meeting a few months ago. So what are some of the key issues here, right? Post the Trump meeting with President Putin in Alaska, we understand now from the United States position is that there have been some concessions in a way put forward by the Russians in terms of accepting security guarantees for Ukraine in a future peace deal. But of course, one of the big asks from the Russians is that the Ukrainians cede the territory, this industrial territory of Donetsk, which has been a part of the front line, a battle that has really epitomized this 3.5-year battle between Ukraine after Russia's invasion of February 2022. So the details here are going to be important. The optics here are going to be important. Constituencies matter in meetings like this. Remember that Ukraine's president has a constituency that needs to see him make some wins in terms of this negotiation. What dynamics will the Europeans bring to this conversation? They've been very clear that they want a ceasefire in place before the substantive issues are dealt with as part of a broader peace deal. What you're seeing now from the United States is very much a push here for Ukraine to defer its ceasefire goals and move straight ahead to the substantive talks in terms of what they will give and take in terms of a future peace arrangement. So very, very complex talks here. We don't know how it's going to go. I can tell you that Zelenskyy is expected, Alicia, to meet with President Trump at the beginning, right around 7 p.m., 7:15 p.m. your time. And then we understand that that will be followed by a larger meeting with the European leaders at around 9 p.m. South African time. So the choreography here, very important. We'll have to see how it plays out.
Absolutely, and the indication there, it seems to be positive, of course, showing as, of course, Trump envoy Steve Witkoff has already said the United States could offer Article 5-like protection, of course, a reference to a section of NATO's treaty which outlines its principle of collective defense. And it said that Zelenskyy has praised this as quite a historic decision. But what are some of the key interlocutors now? Among them, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who had also that update phone call with both President Zelenskyy and Putin just this month, and also some of the sentiments that have been expressed by the key European leaders ahead of today's much important White House summit.
The collective defense question is an interesting one you pose, right? In terms of, comparing it to the Article 5 of the NATO alliance. And remember, at the beginning of this war, part of the Russian concerns here, Putin's concerns, was the eastward creep of NATO not wanting Ukraine to join NATO. That was a big sticking point for the Russians. And so it is a curious issue to put on the table, in terms of accepting the very collective defense that you were against at the beginning, right? So that's a very interesting equation to put forward here in terms of accepting that collective defense principle when it might have been the very issue that started the war. So to your question about some of the interlocutors, let's start with President Ramaphosa, who has been kept apprised of how things are developing. You'll know he spoke to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian president, earlier this month. He spoke to President Putin today. And of course, the presidency is saying that President Putin expressed satisfaction with the manner in which the talks played themselves out in Alaska. On Friday, President Ramaphosa appreciated the briefing from President Putin and underscored the need for compromise on key issues for lasting peace to be attained here. So compromise is going to be an important issue. Another term you're going to be looking out for is the term security guarantees. Another term you're going to be looking for is territorial concessions. I'll tell you what Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, said on his way to the United States earlier today. Everybody wants it to end, but we've got to get it right. We've got to make sure it's a lasting peace and that it's a fair and just peace. So what does a fair and just peace look like to the Europeans as opposed to what it might look like to the United States and to the Russians here? And I'll tell you what the United Nations says on this score, right? Essentially, the United Nations is saying we welcome the talks here. We welcome the initiative put forward by the United States here, their mediation role. But we want a ceasefire, an unconditional ceasefire first, and then getting to the substantive issues on a lasting and durable peace here. But it has to be in line with international law. It has to be in line with the UN Charter. It has to take into consideration tenets of the UN Charter that are very important here, issues of sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, and do not forget, Alicia, that it was the International Court of Justice, right? We always talk about the ICJ in the context of its opinions as it relates to South Africa's case and Israel's withdrawal from Gaza. The ICJ ruled in March of 2022, a month after the invasion, that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was illegal and that they should withdraw and end their special military operation, which to this day has not happened. So all those factors matter and will play in to what we might see today. And I'll just tell you very quickly, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said this: the goal for Monday's talks is to present a united front between Ukraine and the European allies. If we show weakness today in front of Russia, we are laying the ground for future conflicts. He said Ukrainian allies want a strong and lasting peace in Ukraine and for Ukraine's territorial integrity to be respected. So the US is saying territorial concessions. The Ukrainians are saying not so fast. The Europeans are saying we want a just and fair peace here. And of course, there's that ICJ judgment and what the United Nations want. So these are the complexities that will infuse today's discussion in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. Showing some confidence there, as of course the assessment of the UK officials is that Donald Trump will strain every American muscle to actually push through for that deal. Sherwin, we're going to be in touch with you as soon as those proceedings get underway. We're going to leave it there for now. That was our US correspondent there, Sherwin Bryce-Peace, who's currently monitoring developments from New York, where that much important meeting between European leaders, namely Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian president, will be meeting with US President Donald Trump.